Hello. So today I have David Collins, the newly minted Chief Marketing Officer of Store Space Self Storage, a top 20 self storage owner, operator, and developer. Known for his prowess in the digital landscape, David has an illustrious track record of driving growth, reducing cost, and increasing revenue. From spearheading the transition of public storage into the digital age to creating their first mobile website, e-rental platform, and mobile app, David has played a pivotal role in revolutionizing the self-storage industry. Let's dive in and get to know the man behind the success. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Christian. Good to be here.
Great to have you. So let's begin where we always begin here by taking a step back. We'd love to hear about your early days. If you'd mind sharing a little bit about where you were raised, anything about your educational background, and any other kind of formative experiences that shaped you early on.
Yeah, I was raised on the Front Range of Colorado in Boulder, and attended public school like many other people did. It was a great quality of life. Being able to ski after school and go rock climbing over my lunch hour was a fabulous opportunity as a young guy. I think from a formative perspective, one thing that really shaped my thoughts and my future and showed me what opportunity was out there. When I was in undergrad at the University of Colorado, I had the rare privilege of being a TA for a undergrad class while I was a upperclassman. And that class, it was called Profiles in American Enterprise. And each week, a new CEO from a large corporation would come in, and then we would have a recitation session that the TAs would lead afterwards. And it was a large class, about 500 students, so good sized group of people. But we had some spectacular CEOs come through. We had Robert Eaton from Chrysler. We had David Glass from Walmart. I was in charge of the session with Ely Callaway of Callaway Golf. So a lot of great opportunities to really get exposure to very high-powered and influential people in the industry in the 90s. And one of the things that exposure taught me is that these were honestly just regular guys. Now, they were all very bright, but the thing was that they all took the time to listen, and they had a humble self-confidence that equipped them to make difficult decisions and be very successful. And I would say that was very influential in the direction that I went.
Yeah, wow, that had to be an amazing experience. So there's definitely some heavy hitters there. Did you know registering for the class that you would have that type of an experience, or was that just some kind of a happy accident?
The course was recommended, and I took it as a student, and I had such a good experience as a student. I actually talked to one of the TAs and the leading professor afterwards, and went through the process, and they brought me on. So it was a great opportunity.
Yeah, that sounds great. Now, did you go there for marketing? What did you study? Did you know you wanted to go in this field?
I did. Yeah, I actually spent my freshman year of college out in Boston, but ran out of money like many people do. So I came back for some in-state tuition. But I went into the University of Colorado getting straight into the business school as a transfer student, and did a major in marketing and business administration, knowing that was something that was of interest to me. And when I was a young guy, my family lived on a golf course, and from a very early age, I would go out in the evenings and fish golf balls out of the creek and then sell them out of the backyard to golfers. And I remember one golfer coming up to me when I was in elementary school, and he had initials. He picked up a golf ball that had some initials written on it, and he said, "Hey, this is my ball. You can't sell me my own ball back." And I looked at him and told him, "Well, I won't do that. I'll give it to you for free, but I will charge you $1 for retrieving it from the creek for you." And he gave me a $20 bill and walked away. And I distinctly remembered that. And it was all about marketing and positioning the product. So that got me going at an early age and just had a knack for it, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great story. Yeah, I was very much like you growing up. Always had some sort of business going on, whether it be cutting lawns in the neighborhood, or I did try the golf ball thing, but I didn't live as close. So by the time I actually drove to the golf course to pick up the balls, I lost my motivation at that point. But yeah, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. So let's kind of take back before you got into the actual self-storage industry. From what I understand, you had stints agency side at Razorfish. You worked at DirecTV, at Bank of America, and then you eventually, had transitioned to where you're at today in the self-storage industry. But I'm curious, talk a little bit about that, prior to going into self-storage and those kind of early years of your career.
Yeah, after graduate school, I finished grad school at Northwestern in '99, and as you can imagine, the internet was white hot at that point, and consulting and having any kind of knowledge base in anything digital was very much in demand. So that's when I joined Razorfish and went into that line of work. I had a lot of great opportunity to work on some incredible projects. I was based out of the UK for a little while, working for Virgin, and then also did a lot of work for Verizon and a number of other organizations domestically in the US. And the opportunities that led me to where I got really resulted from the fact that over the course of my career, whether it was at Razorfish, DirecTV, or Bank of America, I had a lot of wonderful people investing in me and giving me a lot of good advice and good guidance. And you want to pay that forward and you want to pay it back. And so, in that sense, that's one of the things that led me over to public storage. I was actually recruited into public storage. I was not at Bank of America for very long. Um, Seemed like things when I got there to Bank of America, it was before the financial crisis, but I definitely observed some things that didn't feel like they were the right business practice. And one of the things I always made a promise to was to, or a promise of, was to be proud to frankly tell my parents where I worked and what I did for a living. And where the mortgage industry was at the time for my personal set of morals just didn't fit. So I moved on from that pretty quickly. And the first couple times public storage called, I actually didn't return the call. I thought like many people do, self storage. Are you kidding me? It's a garage. You put stuff in it. I mean, that's not interesting at all. But I did ultimately return the call. I went over and met with the team, and I was incredibly surprised at what a brilliant group of people was over there. Very humble, very professional, but very dialed in and knew exactly what they were talking about. And that's what drew me into the self storage industry, was really the opportunity to work with a high caliber team.
Yeah, that's interesting, and great. Hats off to you, for standing by what your values were, and obviously has led you, down to a great path that you've been on, so far. Now, when you started at Public Storage, as great as the team was there, they were very much still focused on traditional advertising. I think from what I've read at the time, there was maybe 5% of their business was generated online. And you came in and started to pioneer some of their first digital initiatives. Love to talk about that and how that came about, and maybe the ripple effects that it's had on the company moving forward.
Yeah, the self storage industry in general, and certainly public storage, has a very good business model. And so when I got there, change was approached very carefully. And the reason being that obviously it had sweeping implications from a revenue perspective. They had a good formula. It worked very, very well. And candidly, it had been that way since the company was born in 1972. And so to come in and have a change and have something so dramatically sweeping come in, for example, if you buy a yellow page ad, you open the book, that ad is always there. But if you buy a digital ad, it's not always there. It shows up sometimes. And, for people that were accustomed and conditioned to, I spent money, here's exactly what I got for it, and having visual empirical evidence there all the time, to have it not always show up and not understand completely why that occurred was, something that caused pause. So it took a little while for us to get to a good place. But one of the things that really made, I think, a difference in my approach when I got to public storage is a lot of the predecessors that had been there had a very traditional marketing background. Very much of the 60s, 70s, 80s mentality of, I did it, it looks good, this is going to work, but maybe not as much empirical evidence behind it. I, on the other hand, coming out of grad school and through other experiences, had a classically trained direct response background where everything was tracked, everything was empirically demonstrated, and I could show people without having to say anything, just literally on a spreadsheet. We spent $1, we got $1.20 back, and here's the rate of diminishing returns, so we can do it this many more times. And that was revolutionary for the industry. I would say at least within public storage, but likely elsewhere. And we were spending millions of dollars on yellow pages and broadcast TV at the time, so to shift over to something digital that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't, but being able to come in on the backside of that and say, hey, here's what we're getting for it. And being able to have the data be clear enough that other people in the company could validate it and reproduce the exact same results made a big difference. And you started to get trust earned, and we went from there.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. So tell me a little bit about, to kind of piggyback off of that, obviously where you started, and then here we are 15 plus years later. What have you seen as maybe some notable shifts from where you first started to, the industry is at today from a marketing perspective?
I would say the self storage industry went from a fairly unsophisticated approach to a sophisticated one. I remember, first starting at Public Storage, some of our largest competitors didn't even have their name trademarked. Very, very basic things that any marketer today might think, hey, we need to do this, but that just wasn't a consideration. And there was very much kind of a build it and they will come mentality within the industry, not specific to any one operator, but it was just, hey, we're going to put this down there and people will move in. They'll need this. And the reality is that there is certainly a perception that all self storage is alike by a consumer. It's a commodity product, and the reality is that there are certain operators that do a very good job with customer experience and can make a material difference in the consumer's ultimate experience. One of the things we do here at Store Space is we don't have customers, we have guests, because we recognize that there is, a competitive industry out there. And for someone to choose us, we want to recognize that emotional, that psychological component that made them choose our location. There's certainly a lot of influence from proximity to where the individual lives or the pricing. But at the end of the day, what keeps them coming back and what makes them reuse your product is the fact that they had a good experience.
Sure. Yeah. I love that idea of customer or guest versus customer. It sounds very much like a hospitality industry. I'm curious if that hospitality industry has influenced you, or maybe other industries that have influenced you that you kind of brought into the self storage space.
Yeah, one of the things that I started doing very early on was benchmarking outside of the self storage industry. The self storage industry sometimes can be a little bit behind as far as its approach to things, and regardless of industry, if you look at the best, there's always something you can take from what they're doing and incorporate it into your suite of talents that your organization can provide to your guests. And that always makes a big difference, whether it's hospitality or anything else. If you're interacting with the consumer and you find someone who treats them in a delightful way or gives them a delightful experience, take the opportunity to learn from it and you'll benefit.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And I think sometimes we get stuck in our own bubbles, sometimes too much. And it's really great to look outside and get inspiration. So very much agree. The listeners in our audience here primarily are working at advertising and marketing agencies. But I know in talking to a lot of them that they aspire to go client side, and many have aspired and verbalized to me that they'd love to be a CMO someday. Uh, Although it was very early on in your career, you worked agency side. But I'm just curious if you have any advice for those that are looking to make the jump, maybe from an agency to the client side, and then that path to the CMO suite. What might you leave them with?
I would say one of the things that I have observed for people that are most successful at taking that approach of going from agency to client side is, if you are on the agency side and you get the privilege of working on an account that sparks your interest, behave as if you are spending your own money out of your own pocket and not the client's money. That sense of taking ownership in your work and educating yourself so you can come in with recommendations that will truly make a material difference will absolutely be recognized. Additionally, being willing to raise your hand and pitch in and take the lead on new things, even if it may not be your area of expertise and you need to educate yourself on it, just being willing to take on another task is always recognized, because people want to work with people that want to work with them. And most of all, I would encourage folks to do what they say and say what they do. Nobody goes sideways in their career because a mistake was made or something wasn't successful. that only occurs when you don't own it. And yeah, mistakes
Yeah.
are education points too. They can be just as valuable as the success.
Yeah, most definitely. I think you many times it's hard to see it at the time, but you learn more in the long run from some of the mistakes that you make. So, great advice. So, I'd like to change gears a little bit. We've talked a lot about your past. We've talked a little bit about the work that you're doing right now with store space, self storage. But tell me a little bit more about the organization itself and what your remit there is as the CMO.
So we are a top 20 self-storage operator. We have more than 100 properties in 22 states, and our growth has really been fueled by a combination of acquisitions, third-party management, and joint ventures, as well as construction. Self-storage is somewhat unique in that more than half of the facilities in the country are mom and pops. They are either individually owned or they're small local regional chains. The other end of the spectrum is dominated by a few REITs, very large brands with a large presence and very deep pockets. As CMO at Store Space Self Storage, I've been tasked with accelerating performance. We had a good foundation to go from, but I'm working with the team to create very high engagement and generate the lowest cost for acquisitions with the longest length of stay. So we get the kind of guests that are going to be very beneficial to our organization and our investors, but at the same time are the kind of guests that we can serve in a way that is going to be very, very beneficial for them as well. So doing all this while encouraging a positive tone and image as it relates to market presence and customer experience is a big piece of what I do.
Yeah, that's great. So obviously, you've coming off of working at Public Storage, which is the industry titan, a lot of resources. Now you're working for more of a boutique competitor. Um, how do you envision standing your ground against some of the bigger players?
I would say, Christian, that it's not necessarily a matter of standing ground per se, but it's more about focusing on our goals and values to become the best version of store space self storage that we can be. Uh, the advantage of being a boutique operator, as you put it, is that our scale allows us to be very nimble and innovative. We have the flexibility that comes with not being a publicly traded entity, and our investors are in alignment with our long-term vision and goals to reinvent the industry and the guest experience and to become the largest privately held self-storage company in the U.S. Public Storage, has been one of the biggest players in the industry for a long time, and during my privileged time of working with those very intelligent people, it took a lot of empirical evidence at times for me to demonstrate the value of trends that we may take for granted today in terms of the internet and e-commerce and customer acquisition. But for example, once I was able to launch the e-rental platform for Public Storage, the consumer acceptance rate was absolutely phenomenal. And within a year, it accounted for almost half the move-ins of the organization. So, very, very successful, on a number of fronts. But appropriately cautious might be the way to say it because there's a lot of revenue there. So the nimbleness and the ability to be innovative in a shorter time frame is a huge positive in my life.
Yeah, that's great. I know you're just getting your feet wet. You haven't been there too long, but can you talk about any of those innovations that you're planning or thinking about?
I would say that without giving anything away, one of the things that the industry has largely overlooked has been the customer journey. We're looking to kind of reinvent and refine the guest experience in ways that have proven successful in other industries, but may still be in their infancy within the self-storage industry. I'd have to say that aligning the guest experience with the conveniences and expectations that consumers already experience digitally in other areas will be the key to our future success.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think most industries, the journey has really fundamentally changed, over the last few years, and digital has been a huge part of that. So, I'm, without knowing too much about the industry itself, I'm sure there's a lot of opportunities for innovation there. So that sounds like a very smart move. Um, how else do you differentiate yourself? Is that really what you're looking to do? Is really base it around that guest experience, or are there other ways you're trying to differentiate from the mom pops that are out there and other bigger players?
Yeah, I would say it may sound a little obvious. From a corporate perspective, obviously we're focused on obtaining the greatest number of move-ins at the best value possible for an appropriate return. But as far as the guest experience goes, really we're looking to be brilliant with the basics, setting expectation and making sure that gets paid off at every interaction point, to the degree that the guest really feels like they've had a great experience with us. It sounds very simple on the surface, but it's going to be very complex to execute the way we'd like
Yeah,
to.
yeah. Like most things are. You know
Yeah,
what to do, but actually executing is a whole nother story. So
right.
you talked a little bit just now about some, but maybe if you can double click on that. But what are some of the KPIs in your role as CMO? Um, are they holding you to, and you're responsible for driving? And how do you foresee that kind of evolving in your approach?
It's pretty simple. Revenue and move-in volume are those are the KPIs.
Yeah,
Everything else ladders up to that. So it sounds obvious, but that's as complex as it is.
that's what it is. Yeah. Okay. Where do you see things going from a marketing perspective? I know you've talked a lot about obviously the guest experience, but let's even fast forward. All the rages, AI right now. I'm not sure where AI fits in where you're at. I'm sure it does in some way, shape, or form. But where do you see things going?
You know, Self storage has long been reliant on proximity and convenience, as I mentioned earlier in our conversation. Uh, you know, Nobody wakes up in the morning thinking, I want to move into self storage with my free time today. It simply doesn't happen. Our product is a life event product, not an aspirational one. So the event of engaging with the product generally gets delayed until the need becomes so pressing it can no longer be ignored. To that end, our strategy is simple. We have to be ahead of the game and appear in as many places people are looking for us when that inevitable life event occurs. And the key to success is being efficient and effective in the targeting of our marketing resources to avoid waste at all turns. We are experimenting with a couple different approaches from AI. I recognize that a lot of people in the industry, a lot of people digitally, a lot of people just talking out there think, oh, AI is going to solve everything, and can write our marketing copy for us, and we'll instantly have good SEO ranking on Google. And well, that may be the case, but I also have a perspective that Google has built a multi-billion-dollar industry on making manual work get rewarded as opposed to things that can be automated. So I'm not sure that's going to be given up too quickly. But where we can, we're going to be experimenting with everything. My approach is try anything once and the stuff that works twice.
Yep, yep, that's great. So a lot of in our audience, I'm sure have I know some of in our audience have worked in the self storage space. I know others that we've worked with have mentioned that that they would love to work in it. Curious, for those agencies that are looking to get more involved in this market, like what advice would you give them to help navigate this sector?
You know, I would say, Christian, it's almost cliche how straightforward self storage appears to many marketers. But I would say it would be a mistake to overlook what I consider to be the critical nuance of the industry. We're not selling space in a box. That may be the physical execution of what our industry does, but our real product is actually a psychological one. If you think about it, by the time consumers arrive at the decision to use self storage, they've already gone through the mental cycle of other areas or other ways they can store their things. Can they put it in Aunt Sally's basement? Can they put it in their garage? Can they stuff it in the trunk of their car? Or are they tolerant of just continuing to trip over it? But they ultimately decide to choose to hold on to their things by one of the most expensive means possible, which is leasing land. And that's what they are actually doing from a legal perspective when renting a self storage space. So the tip to understanding what we really do in the industry is we don't rent self-storage space. Our real product and our real benefit is allowing people to hold on to their emotional attachments for the privilege of writing us a check. That's what this industry is about, and that is what the service that we provide.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, and bringing it really back down to that emotional side. So you mentioned a little bit about your team already. Curious if you could talk about what does your in-house team look like today? What are they responsible for? Are you looking to build that out? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the team that I work with is made up of about a dozen professionals with a broad range of experiences in multiple disciplines. Of course, we have individuals dedicated to things that you would consider to be very traditional in this day and age: search engine optimization, paid digital advertising, social media, that type of thing. supported by talented graphic designers and content marketers. But we certainly have specialists as well. I find more and more that being able to do proper data analysis and proper understanding of consumer behavior is absolutely critical to success. Because, like I said, we're in an emotional business. So understanding what triggers and what behaviors correlate with various experiences can be very helpful when you're trying to make your advertising more effective.
Great. Yeah. And is everything being handled in-house? Are you working with any external agencies at this time?
We do work with some external agencies. Have a number of external partners that are very valuable, and critically, they behave like they're part of my team. My approach to that is whether your paycheck says store space self storage or agency or provider X, you are on my team and you are part of the group. So to that
Sure.
degree, we share data, we share knowledge. There's no walled garden, so to speak. It's everybody's given what they need to be as successful as they can be.
Great. And what kind of capacity are some of these partners working with you on?
Um, we look in certain digital aspects. With the volume of locations that we have, and while we are a top 20 operator, a little over 100 locations is not necessarily enough to warrant having certain skill sets full time on staff, and so you bring that in as necessary. But again, it's really the key of treating clients or treating folks like a partner as opposed to a client agency relationship, and making them feel like they're really necessary. One of the things that we do and that I've always had a practice of is anybody that works for me, whether it's on the team or otherwise in an agency capacity, I have them go and rent a storage unit and move into it. I have them be the customer. I have them really interact with the product, and I'll pay for it. I have no problem doing that. But being in there for a couple months and going in and out and chit chatting with other people that may be at the facility, other customers, can give a wealth of knowledge that you just wouldn't even get over the course of a couple of years.
Wow, that's a really great idea. It's simple at the end of the day, but really powerful, I'm sure, at the same time. Has there been any kind of key unlocks that you've noticed over the years that came from that experience?
Yeah, we've, there have been a number of instances where, I've secret shopped properties myself and gone there, and the property manager, not knowing who I am, has walked me around other customers and not talked to them at all. Yet you see certain activity at that location that may be troubling. You're trying to figure out what it is, and just going up and talking to some of those customers and asking them, how's your experience been here? I just moved in, and getting their 2 cents gives you huge insight on, oh, I wouldn't have figured that out in 6 months, and we can fix that tomorrow. So there have been a number of things. I hesitate to say specifics for confidentiality purposes, but it's incredibly valuable to be in touch with the people that are using your product and engaging with your product yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Customer interview is such a powerful, uh, tactic that I think sometimes is overlooked, and especially if in a situation like yours where you can actually go and experience it and walk and be among them is, I'm sure, really, really powerful. That's great.
Yep.
So you mentioned from an agency perspective, really kind of owning it and being a part of it, treating it like it's your own money, which I really
Mhm.
loved that you mentioned earlier. Are there any other things that you've experienced with some of your best agency partners over the years that really help strengthen the relationship, and any advice you might give then to agencies listening to this right now?
Yeah, I would say the one thing that really stands out for me, and the biggest gap that I've experienced in partnering with folks that may not be internal to the organization, is when those external partners don't do their homework, either about the business or the industry. I found that a lot of agencies will tend to analogize the self-storage industry to something they already know, rather than doing the research and learning the details of self-storage itself. The self-storage industry can be very nuanced, and it's just a few degrees different than anything else. So an agency that has worked in multifamily housing, for example, may have a great experiential base in that, but unless they put forth the effort to learn the subtleties of our industry, their efforts to be a good partner are going to fall short.
Yeah, that's great advice. Do your homework. Again, another basic, but sometimes it's overlooked.
Yeah.
Um, so that's great. So in terms of it, you're on the cutting edge of digital. You mentioned AI earlier. Where else do you go to keep on top of these marketing trends and industry news? Are you a social media guy that's following it on social media? Are you reading certain trade publications, events, conferences, something else? Tell us a little bit about that.
I'll tell you, Christian, I find that, to coin an old phrase, an hour across the table from a wise man's worth a day in the library. I find that just staying in contact with smart people in the industry, keeping in touch. There's a number of folks that I've worked with at Google, for example, or at other places over the years that just brilliant folks, and just staying in touch with them, keeping those relationships up, and you know, intentionally making an effort. If I travel, I'll always call up someone in the town that I'm traveling to and ask if they want to grab a cup of coffee and just catch up for a few minutes. And it's amazing how current you can stay, just by talking to the people that are actually changing the landscape, as opposed to some reactionary things. But I would encourage anybody, especially even in the self storage industry. There's a lot of great trade publications. There's three major publishers in our industry that host national conferences, and they make it their job to keep everybody informed. And they do actually a very good job of it. So if you don't have the benefit of, a lot of good contacts that may be influential in the industry, you can certainly get it from a lot of the trade publications that make it their point to keep you current.
Yeah, really, really good advice there. So we're winding things down here, David. Is there anything that I asked you or haven't asked you that you wished I would have asked you today?
I would say one thing that a lot of people are curious about, especially having been at Public Storage for almost 16 years, biggest in the industry. You're the head of marketing. I mean, it's the dream position for the self storage industry if you're a marketer. What drew you to store space? Is the question I get a lot of the time. And I would say at the most basic level, again, it was the people. The CEO and co-founder Chris Harris, and then the other co-founder Rob Consalvo, are two of the sharpest minds in the industry. Very creative guys, very forward thinking, and progressive in what they are willing to try and test. And I really appreciated and bonded with that mentality of, as I said earlier, try anything once and the stuff that works twice. They're well known for a lot of their pioneering work. They were the guys that worked at iStorage and had that first big transaction in the mid-teens to NSA, and then their subsequent launch of StoreSpace drew a lot of interest throughout the industry. And with their vision and dedicated team that they've built, their goal of becoming one of, if not the largest privately held self-storage company in the nation, is definitely within reach. And it was a good group to partner with.
Yeah, sounds like a great team. Exciting times ahead of you, and a chance for you to really be innovative and revolutionize another company just like you had previously done. So excited to watch this journey, David. So for those that want to follow that journey as well, where do you recommend people go to stay on top of you or the company?
I would say visit storespace.com, rent a storage unit. Let us know how your experience is. Would love to hear from you.
And there you go. All right. Well, thank you very much, David. Congrats on all your successes so far and good luck. And thank you for being on.
Thank you, Christian. Great to be here. Have a good day.